Good evening, everybody. I'm pleased to welcome you here on the next episode of our research lab. This time we are here with two professors that are researchers of Tel Aviv and modernism at large, and two conservationists. Both have their own practices as well as they are teaching at the university. I want to welcome Ruti Liberty Shalev, who is a teacher at the Technion, and Shmuel Groag, who is a teacher at Petzalel. And today we will have a dialogue between the historic city of Jaffa and its evolution and the mandatory plan of Geddes for the garden city. So I want to welcome Shmuel Groag to start. After his lecture, we'll have a few minutes to have a dialogue. And please, if you have any questions or remarks, write them down, and we'll be happy to then start a conversation together with you guys. So please, Shmuel.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here and more than glad to share this speech with Ruti, who is a very good friend and a colleague, and we are going our way in the field of cultural heritage for many years together, even though we are in different schools, but not in a different way of thinking. So today I want to share with you, and I'll share the screen. Let's see if it's not this one. Okay. So tell me if it's okay. Is it on full screen?
Yes, Shmuel, thank you. Before you start, I also want to mention that both Shmuel and Ruti are doing our competition together with us. So both of them are heading a studio where their students are also planning a building edition for this competition. So we're very excited to see what you will bring in the end of the competition. Thank you.
So basically, the main point is that I'm speaking in behalf of modernism in Jaffa. Basically, people think about Jaffa as a very oriental place, and Tel Aviv as a center of modernism. But my claim is that modernism developed in Jaffa parallel to Tel Aviv, and we have to understand the different way and what I call the hybrid way modernism developed in Jaffa. Tel Aviv basically was a neighborhood of Jaffa. So Tel Aviv grew out of Jaffa. Jaffa is the town mother and Tel Aviv is a suburb. It's very hard to think about this way, those days, or these days, but historically that's the way it was. And Tel Aviv during the years developed, and then it separated itself from Jaffa. But originally, Jaffa was an old town, as you see here in this map of Theodor Zandel from one of the German Templars, another neighborhood of Jaffa, who drew this map in the end of the 19th century. So basically, you see an old city, very developed old city, with the main port of Palestine of those days. And around it, you see the Jaffa oranges groves. So this was Jaffa, kind of a mix between urbanism and agriculture. Of course, the main product was the orange. Later, what I want to speak today is about the history of my subject of my research nowadays, which is nowadays Jerusalem Boulevard in Jaffa, but originally it was Jamal Pasha Boulevard, and then it was King George Boulevard. And the houses, two houses in the competition, the two houses in Jaffa are quite about 100 meters or even less far from the boulevard. So basically, this is the same urbanism, the same neighborhood of the boulevard. So here we are in the beginning of the 20th century. We are in the middle of the First World War, and we see in the late Ottoman times of Palestine. And in the middle of the war, Jamal Pasha has enough energy and enough urban drive to create the boulevard. And here we see the governor of Jaffa, Hassan Bek, in the middle of the July summer, putting the stone for the boulevard. And that's the way it looked, again, in the middle of the war. It was taken by a German aircraft, which helped the Ottomans at those time. And you see a kind of a boulevard, a Haussmannian act, drawn through the orchards of Jaffa, fully paved, but empty from both sides. And this was the beginning of the modern urbanism of Jaffa. You still see the old city with the port, cities out of the walls, developing, and the train station, and this urban act of the boulevard. And that's the way it looked in the early 20s. People said it's a boulevard that leads nowhere, but it's not true. It led to the road to Jerusalem, but the buildings were not there yet. The act was so successive that Jamal Pasha took the same team to build the Jamal Pasha Boulevard in Damascus. And what I like about this picture is that everybody looks very Ottoman, but half of them are Jews, half of them are Palestinians, half of them are Germans, and half of them are Syrians, the people who do the work. And that's part of the hybridity of this area. So the hybridity of Jaffa is not only hybridity of modernism, but it's an hybridity, a kind of Mediterranean hybridity with influences from all the east side of the Mediterranean, that till 1948, you could travel along the Mediterranean. You could travel in less than half a day from Jaffa to Beirut or to Damascus or to Alexandria. So we have to think about Jaffa culturally in a different way that we speak nowadays of Tel Aviv and Jaffa and Israel in general. So the beginning of the boulevard in the early 20s, and don't mistake what's written Jerusalem. This is a mistake of the original postcard. You see, if we talk about architecture, you see kind of a mixture of architecture. Basically, this was influenced by Egyptian architecture from Alexandria and Cairo, because the architects came from there. And in the middle, you see an act, the electric station, an act, or modern act by a Jewish architect, Richard Kaufman, who did it for the electric company of Pinchas Rutenberg. Again, you see a lot of orchards around it. And later, when in the 30s and beginning of the 30s, you see the whole neighborhood developing in the north of the boulevard and in the south of the boulevard, the neighborhood of the Nuzha. And when we speak about those two buildings that are part of the competition, they are here to the right, really right side of these pictures. But what's kind of, for us, very impressive is to see how many ships were in the port of, using the port of Jaffa, which at that time was the main port of Palestine in general. Haifa port was not built yet. And the way new roads were paved along the town, and the whole very strong urge of development with very modern style buildings, if you can really see down into the picture. So this was the daily life of Jaffa. Again, you can see the mixture of people dressed with tarbush and very modern style people. And for us Israelis to look at pictures like this is quite amazing nowadays, because as you might know, all the Palestinians of Jaffa were uprooted in 1948. So till 1948, there was an existence of two parallel cities in the same area. So Tel Aviv on one side and Jaffa on the other, kind of two cities having cooperation between them, but having also a very strong political fight between the two communities, which in the end of the day, what happened is that almost all the Palestinians of Jaffa were uprooted from the city. So what was left are the buildings, and part of them are the buildings that we are dealing with. So the building stayed, but the community was no more anymore there. Another story I want to tell you is, again, dealing with modernism, is what happened in 1936 in the old city of Jaffa. This is the old city of Jaffa around 1936, and later in the middle of the year, two roads, kind of an anchor system, were kind of paved, but paved through bulldozers inside the old city, kind of a punishment act of the British mandate government against the Arab revolt of 1936. So the whole history of Jaffa is full of destruction, and here you see more detailed photos of this destruction made not by the Israelis this time, but by the British government, colonial government, kind of a punishment act. And all this, you have to look at the style of the building. So basically, we think about Jaffa, we think about very Orientalist style, like this picture of the old city. But what I claim that in the boulevard and in other neighborhood, modern neighborhood, a whole different architecture developed. In this city, in this picture, we are going back to the boulevard. We're looking at the northern part of the boulevard. We look at a very traditional house building, the Nabulsi building, built in a style that was very popular in the whole Ottoman Empire, in Lebanon and Palestine and Damascus as well, which we call the central space house, which had a roofed, tiled roof and a plan of a central hall with four rooms around it. This was a typical building of the 19th century. And what developed in Jaffa and in other towns as well, in Haifa as well, and other towns in Palestine as well, is a totally different style, kind of a modernism, mixing the old styles together with the influence from a modern style. So here we see the boulevard, the same boulevard in the 40s. You will see the style kind of getting more and more clear or clean, I would say, with a French style gardening in the middle of the boulevard. And at the same time, when we speak about cultural heritage, of course, we don't deal only with architecture, we deal also with culture, with politics, with economy. The whole neighborhood of the boulevard, the whole area, was the central town or the central district where all the government houses were stayed, and full of hotels, cinemas, and the municipality of Jaffa, which we'll look at it in a moment. So this is the main cinema building. Again, we are speaking about style of Art Deco influenced. This cinema, the Alhambra cinema, was kind of influenced by a cinema, the Roxy cinema in Beirut. The same architect from Beirut came to do it in Palestine, or won a competition to do it in Palestine. And till today, this is the kind of cultural symbol of the lost town, the lost Palestinian town before 48. Jaffa was the central town, the central cultural center of Palestine, in a way, the same way that Tel Aviv is today for whole Israel. Here we see the Alhambra cinema with a film, presenting the film of Kulthum, which is a very famous Egyptian singer. As I said, it was not only a place for cinemas. In this picture, we see two of the cinemas. We see the Alhambra cinema, and we see the Farouk cinema. It's an open cinema. And the next building of it, we see the municipality of Jaffa. Again, in this time, very modern building. So in this picture, which is also the picture in my background, but not only for you, usually I sit in the middle of the 40s in Jaffa, which I feel more convenient. And so in this picture, we see the whole hybridity of one Art Deco style, one kind of freestyle cinema, and then a very strict modern building. And we see the water tower planned by a Jewish engineer, Arpad Gut, for the municipality of Jaffa, in a style that was, of course, influenced by the minaret, by a Muslim minaret, but this time used as a water tower. So this hybridity is very different from the hybridity of Tel Aviv that Ruti will speak about it later, because Tel Aviv was very strictly modern. So in Tel Aviv, you had to be modern. You couldn't run away. While in Jaffa, the mixture, until today, you see the mixture in Jaffa, mixture of style, mixture of life. And the idiom of Jaffa is that Jaffa is the mother of the foreigner, El Arib, the mother. Jaffa accepts always the foreign influences and kind of combines it with its daily life. Very open city. So here again, we see the municipality when the High Commissioner of Palestine is coming to visit the last mayor of Jaffa. And here I show you the interior picture, which is a very simple office building. And it was also office and a kind of hotel, changing uses during the time. And I urge you also to look at the interior plans of the building you are dealing, because the interior plans are very different in Jaffa and in Tel Aviv. In Jaffa, you still see the influence of the central house, as I showed you before, where you have kind of a central hall with rooms around it, while in Tel Aviv, the influence of the modern style of planning is very, very influential. So this was in the same time that we had the modern style building in Jaffa, also this style existed, kind of Oriental style, but but modern buildings with more Oriental influence, and also buildings like this, like the Chazbun building family, which is kind of built by the Jerusalemite architect, Baramki. And what you see in this building is another element that is very much in use in Jaffa, which is prefabricated elements, like the one you see here on the terrace, and the issue of the open plan of the building. So every time you plan a building in modern Jaffa, you plan already on the top of the building, you plan the verandas for the future floors to come. So again, the city is open, it's open to growth, it's open to changes, while the style is not one style. The style is a hybrid style, but it all goes well in the mixture. Those are the plan of the Chazbun building. And this is the paper of the office paper of the Chazbun family nowadays in Los Angeles, but they still keep the memory of the Chazbun building, the Chazbun fortress, they call it, and the orange groves that they had in Jaffa, they still keep the memory of the place. So the building you are getting it in Jaffa has people around behind the walls. We always try to look for those people. Sometimes it's very hard to find the families, but still you have to remember that even though we are dealing with the outside of the building, there are a lot of stories of the people that lived inside it. Here is the Baramki family, the architect's building. And here I come to I don't know how much time I have, Sharon. Here I come to the history of the architect.
Sorry, maybe 5 more minutes? Okay,
good. So here I come to the history of the architect behind the building in Sgula Street number 8. It's Ibrahim Khaja. I think he's one of the most talented architects that were active in Jaffa. Here is a building he did in Haifa before coming to Jaffa, because he moved from Haifa to Jaffa. We don't know why, because there is no written history about Hajar, about the architect as well, not only about the families, but also the history of the architect is kind of a hidden history. This is a building he did in Haifa in a more, what we used to call eclectic style. I like to call it more early modern style. And here is one of the cinemas he did in Jaffa, the Rashid cinema, in Art Deco style, more free style. And it was in the late 30s, and cinemas were part of the national movement. So you see a Palestinian flag on top of the cinema, as you could see maybe in the Alhambra building as well. This is a picture of the Rashid cinema taken already in the 50s, already after the Israeli period, but still you see how glamorous it was. So all this area of culture and the government was kept in the boulevard, even the community was changed. And here's the cinema, as the street name was changed, also the cinema name was changed. It was changed from Rashid to Tzlil, and that's the way, but still it was used as a cinema, and till nowadays it's also used as a club, as a nightclub, the same building. Again, this is a picture of the boulevard, and you see two of Hajar building. One is the Rashid cinema, and the other is this end is what we call Barclays Bank cinema. And in the middle of it, you see a style of a building by Harrison. This is a post office built by the Mandate government. So you see this hybridity of the city is everywhere. Another work of Hajar that was not built, it's Khalaf Hotel in the other side of the boulevard. And here we come to the building in school. I think this is the best example of Art Deco in Jaffa, and not only in Jaffa. It's a piece of art, even though the building was not fully built as it was planned. And here is a twin building, as I showed you before.
It was part of our competition, right? The one you showed.
No, this one not.
No,
this one. This
yeah.
one. The green one is a competition, but what I want to show you is other works of this talented architect. And this building is quite the same style, even though it's more simpler than the one in Sgula Street. Here is another private building he did. And here is a building he did in Haifa before moving to Jaffa. And again, as we did a tour with Ruti and her student, I think it's very important to go into details. So here I show you a little bit of the details that students from Technion did regarding only the floor tiles. You see how freestyle everything was. So it's another way to take the competition going into the details. Just to finish my talk, I want to show you the history of the building of the municipality, which turned to be the center for the army governor of Jaffa when Jaffa was conquered by the Jews in 48. And the building was the central of the military governor. Here you see some Jewish soldiers in the front of the building, which still used to be the municipality of Jaffa. And nowadays we do hope that it will come back to the community. And I want to thank you with this picture from the 40s. Thank you.
Thank you, Shmuel. Just one question I have before we move on to Ruti. Just for the people who are not from Tel Aviv or from Israel, can you just explain the relationship between Tel Aviv and Jaffa? Like, how come Tel Aviv and Jaffa were melted together, and when did it happen, and why the architecture is different here than in Tel Aviv?
So as I told you, basically Tel Aviv was a neighborhood of Jaffa. It's a garden neighborhood of Jaffa, but from the beginning, Tel Aviv wanted to be separated from Jaffa. This was a vision of the founders of Tel Aviv, to be separated from Jaffa. And with all the political tension during the British mandate in Palestine, step by step, they managed to get a kind of a separate municipality. So first they got a situation of township, and then they got a different kind of to be a different town. So you could see on the same area, a place that was used to be one city divided into two cities, but in a way, it's very interesting to study the history, because there was a lot of, even though there was a lot of military tension between the two communities because of national reasons, there was a lot of cooperation as well. The most famous story that in 1948, in the middle of the war of 1948, there was an agreement to stop the war in order to give people a chance to pick the oranges and to transport them to Europe. So this interest was kind of mutual interest. And this is part of the stories that are...
Famous Jaffa oranges, no? Still
yeah. Famous Jaffa oranges. But Jaffa oranges were produced, the label of Jaffa was used by Jews, it was used by Palestinians, it was used also by the German Templars. So everybody used the label Jaffa.
Okay, great. So I see here...
A lot to read.
Yeah. Yes, but I think it's interesting also to really see that in this competition, I mean, it was your suggestion to add buildings in Jaffa. And I think through this journey that I'm doing here in the competition, I really sense that the architecture itself, the modernism itself, has a total different language. And I think it's important for our viewers who are also entering the competition to note that and to act according to that as well. So thank you, Shmuel, for that. We'll come back to you later. And now we are coming to Ruti, or Ruth, and we will speak about the Geddes plan, which is very much part of the DNA of Tel Aviv until today. So please, Ruti.
Thank you, Sharon. I think that in many senses, to Shmulik's talk, perhaps also...
Please do a full screen.
Is it not full screen?
Now it is.
Okay, this means that you're in delay, so I should know that. I think this will come as a supplement to things Shmulik has raised, and also to
I guess
architecturally.
Ruti, we have a bad connection, so I don't know. Sometimes
what should I do?
I don't know. We'll just go on, but sometimes we'll have to start over. So, yeah.
Okay, so let me know if it gets worse, and I will disconnect and connect again.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, so I'll start so far. I would like to first touch on this general framework that we have for the competition, which has to do with the historic urban landscape approach. And here I'm quoting sentence which is highlighted, sorry, in red, talks about the goal of the urban, the historic urban landscapes approach to support a balanced and sustainable relationship between the urban and natural environment. And in this sense, there is no architect who is better, no planner, who is more of this type than Patrick Geddes, who Tel Aviv was fortunate to have as a planner during the 1920s. Patrick Geddes, who and eventually as a town planner,
but every few minutes you're getting disconnected, so I don't know, maybe we'll wait for you to connect again. Meanwhile, me and Shmulik we're going to have a little chat. Okay. And try maybe through your phone. Yeah, so Shmuel, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so do you think that Jaffa, like I mean, we have this really beautiful plan for Tel Aviv, like the Geddes plan, which was originally more made or influenced by the British mandate, who really brought this guy here. But what about the general plan of Jaffa? Is there any like overall planning, or is it more like bits and pieces that developed according to the needs of the city at that time?
Ron, is this a better connection?
Yes, Ruti.
Yeah, we'll just let Shmuel answer, and then.
Basically, I had some slides about town planning, but I knew we wouldn't have time. But town planning was made in Jaffa by the British mandate people. So basically by Henry Kendall from Jerusalem, planning Jaffa. But his idea was more like planning the way the town goes. So there was not a revolutionary planning, but there was a town planning. So the way we see the boulevard and the way we see the neighborhood in the northern part, the Noga neighborhood where the two buildings are today, it's an outcome of a town planning that limited the numbers, the height of the building. So basically you see urban blocks, very urban blocks. I think that we don't have this kind of urbanity in Tel Aviv. It's more like a European urban blocks with the houses really touch the pavement. Very different from the Geddes plan, but there was a town plan of the British town plan, and we can speak about it later about town planning.
Okay, thank you. So, Ruti, please.
Okay, can you hear me properly now? Okay, great. So I will continue from Geddes, who was very much concerned with the combination of nature and the city, and indeed planned Tel Aviv according to these concepts. Now, if we want to understand what exactly Geddes did in Tel Aviv, I will start with the background, which is that in 1925, Patrick Geddes was invited by the mayor of Tel Aviv to plan Tel Aviv's physical connection to Jaffa and its expansion to the north. Tel Aviv has been awarded the status of a township independent of Jaffa in 1921, a few years earlier. As such, under the British Mandate's Town Planning Act, the city was required to produce an ordinance plan which would enable the control of development. Geddes produced a plan which covered the lands enclosed in the town's newly defined boundary, as well as the northern region beyond, which he envisaged as the future reserve of the lands of Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is commonly considered to have been born with the establishment of the neighborhood of Achuzat Bait in 1909. This is this one, number 8, surrounded by yellow. In reality, its southernmost districts were established well before this date. And when Geddes received the task of planning the city's expansion, the actual city of Tel Aviv was composed of those few Jewish neighborhoods whose lands had been purchased and developed independently during the late 19th century and the first decade of the 20th century. Just so you know, just so you have a glimpse of where our buildings are, the buildings of the competition, they are all at the very southern part of the Geddes plan, and indeed almost outside of it, as you will see soon. And the Ruchama and Segula are what was considered Jaffa at the time. So as you can see, all of our buildings are in fact located in a connecting part of the city, because the Geddes plan applied mostly to what happens in the north, in the areas which were still vacant and open to development, and Jaffa in the south, which was as well developed. So the area which was in between the proposed Geddes plan and the existing Jaffa was the Tel Aviv of the 1920s and the foreign suburbs of Jaffa. And all of our buildings are in fact in this area, which was not totally subjected to Geddes's plan, although it was officially part of it. Geddes' task was, as I said, to connect between Jaffa and Tel Aviv, and this area was considered by him as a connecting tissue. Okay. During the 1920s and into the 40s, the city was exploding with real estate activity. Jewish immigrants from Europe were pouring into the country, making many of them looking to settle in the first Jewish city, as Tel Aviv was perceived at the time. Many were living in temporary accommodations, shacks, sheds, and even tents, as can be seen here, due to the shortage of dwelling units. Lands in the north were being rapidly purchased by private entrepreneurs, as well as official Zionist organizations. Even Geddes himself commented in his report on this wild scene of land speculation, which led to exaggerated land prices beyond ordinary values over the world, even in considerable European cities, so Geddes himself said. The city grew rapidly during the 1920s and 40s, first along existing routes such as Allenby Street, and then according to the layout of the Geddes plan, which was ultimately approved as a statutory plan in 1938, and is nowadays known as Plan 58. By the 1940s, Tel Aviv, the city, has expanded throughout the area of Geddes plan and beyond. So you can see here the Geddes plan as it was perceived, as it was prepared initially on the left side, and in its statutory incarnation 15 years later on the right side. As you can see, it is smaller, and it excludes this connecting tissue between the new Tel Aviv and the old Jaffa. And what you can see here is that by the 1940s, all this area, which in the previous areas here, we could see was empty, and even in 1932 was largely empty. Over here, you can see where the Dizengoff circle is going to be. In 1944, all of this area was filled up and even beyond. So the development ratio was extremely fast. Now, Geddes proposed a plan which organized the city of Tel Aviv into a grid of mainways which defined perimeter blocks. The main idea of a perimeter block city with an inner garden is not a new idea. Notwithstanding contemporary concepts which at the time circulated among the garden city movement and with which Geddes was well familiar, the concept of the perimeter block is as old as cities themselves. Many historic cities in the East as well as in the West still rely on this basic urban form. So what was unique about Geddes' design? First, it is important to note that Geddes had a social mission to facilitate the emergence of a community in the city and to prevent the emergence of an alienated population of industrial working class city dwellers. His answer to this was to bring the benefits of nature into the cities. In his own words, the true meeting ground, both for the children and the elders, is the village squares. This social life of old and young in village squares makes up village centers that are second to none that I know of, either in the East or in the West. If we plan within the town, keeping this village life fully in view, we shall diminish that deterioration of the villager that is the main cause of the decline and degeneration of life in cities everywhere. It is important to remember that Geddes' career as an urban planner had a strong conceptual dimension, which had been widely researched and written about. The significant impact of his approach and written work in the 20th century town planning is perhaps best expressed by Peter Hall in his Cities of Tomorrow, who describes Geddes as a visionary and a central proponent of the anarchist strain of planning thought, who more than anyone contributed to planning theory the idea that men and women could make their own cities. So, looking at Geddes' concepts of the city block and of the city gardens, we can see that he viewed the block as, and especially the center of the block, on which I would focus in a minute, as having four main goals: as a meeting for local communities, as a spot of nature in the middle of the city, as in the field gaining on the street, in his words, an escape from the bustle of city life, and an urban skeleton. The inner block garden as a meeting place for local communities was described in the quote which I just read about Geddes' ideas as he developed them in India a few years earlier, about the life of the villager who comes into the city and wants to remain in contact with nature. The idea of the nature in the city is also repeated in the Geddes plan of 1925, the Tel Aviv Geddes plan, where he says the model and ideal before us is that of the garden village, but this is no longer merely suburban, but as coming into the town and even into the very heart of the city block. He continues with this to describe the idea of creating a safe haven from the bustle of the city. For given mainways carrying all through traffic, we can now plan the interior of each home block with as few roads as possible. And this is the city block, which is strategically planned and placed component of the urban skeleton. And now I will go into describing the city block itself, the Geddes city block, which is composed of the following. First of all, there are the mainways, the main roads which run from north to south. They are thoroughfares for traffic, and they are designed to function as central transportation arteries. We can see the Ben Yehuda Street as one of those main artery, which was developed as such already in the 1930s. These are crossed by East and West Streets, also mainways, but those are either main streets or boulevards, which connect the city to the sea and allow the sea breeze to ventilate the city. This concept was perhaps implemented by Geddes as a lesson he learned from the boulevard of Rothschild, which was already in place when Geddes arrived in Tel Aviv, and perhaps also from the boulevard of Jamal Pasha in Jaffa. Geddes was known for studying the circumstances on the ground before starting to plan and incorporating existing conditions into his proposals. This is the Ben Gurion Boulevard up in the north, which was designed according to the Geddes plan. The next component is the perimeter of residential plots, which create a butt up to the streets. They form the basic city block and create a block of approximately 60 dunams, 200 by 300, quite similar to many city blocks in Europe. The exterior line of residential plots is lined by an interior line of building plots, which face into the center of the city block. So we have a line of residential plots which face the streets and are exposed to the city streets, and a line of internal streets which face the center of the block. Here we can see it very clearly in one of the blocks in the north of Tel Aviv, where there is an exterior perimeter and an interior perimeter which doubles it. The next component is the component of the homeways, so described in Geddes' plan. The homeways were narrow roads strictly for local inner block vehicular access. They were deliberately planned as indirect streets, which don't encourage thorough traffic, but rather only local traffic. And they were deliberately planned as very, very narrow streets. In fact, by Geddes' instructions, no more than 8 meters wide. Again, to discourage thorough traffic. And the last component to connect between the inner streets and the outer streets were the vine and rose and vine lanes, which provide pedestrian access from the exterior of the residential plot into the center of the block, a center occupied by, these are the lanes, and they lead to the block garden in the center. The block garden is not a collection of private back gardens as many cities display in their perimeter blocks, but rather a public space for the communal use of all block residents. So if we look at the final product of the Geddes plan, we must consider all of these components as essential parts of the Geddes city block. And when we look at the Geddes plan, it should always be analyzed through the basic unit, this block, which according to Geddes is the physical and social entity which supports the emergence of a thriving local community within the context of the big city. Perhaps more than any of the plan's features, the city blocks with the block gardens at their center reflect Geddes' unique vision for the relationship between society and nature in the garden city. Again, I'm placing the buildings of the competition in this context because in fact, the city, once you understand it as a city of blocks and you identify them, and I will talk a little bit about the blocks which are not ideal blocks, but real life blocks. All of our buildings are outside this plan because they are located in the tissue of Tel Aviv, which was built prior to the Geddes plan. Now, a few words about the idea of this plan as of this concept as an urban mechanism for regulating development. This city block event initially was, as we see it here, one story with a very small house slightly removed from the street and with a big plot of land, available around it. Very quickly, already in the 1930s, it grew into 2 stories and 3 stories and became a lot denser than Geddes had anticipated. Yet, as one can easily see, in an ideal situation where the garden plot is exactly as described before, the buildings can grow quite freely without impeding the quality of housing.
Can I stop you for a second, Wuti? I'm just wondering if you go the slide back.
Yes.
About his sentence of land speculation, which he really mentioned is in his report.
Yes.
So can you say a word about that? Because I think it's very relevant for the competition and the sort of new layer we're building on.
I will show a little bit of this in like 3 slides down the line, just to show what actually happened, because of course the block we're showing here is this ideal block, which didn't happen anywhere due to the very intense real estate pressures, which were accompanying all of the preparation of the plan and then the implementation of the plan. So I will show it in a minute.
In the 30s, not only now.
Yes, in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 40s, amazing land speculation was going on in the background, and it was, in fact, there is no block which looks like this. This is the ideal block. None of the blocks is the ideal block. But if we were to, pursue this idea of the ideal block a little bit longer, we can see just a regular block with streets running through it would look on the left side. If we were to count how many plots of the same size, we can put in a normal city block as in the left, or an ideal Geddes plot, a Geddes block, we can see that the number of plots is not severely different. You can accommodate 95 plots in a regular block and 84 plots in a Geddes block. However, if you look at how they intensify, you can see that the Geddes ideal block can handle this intensifying in a much better way, and it doesn't need a lot of explanation to see that the quality of the environment in a Geddes plot as it intensifies is much better than the quality of life in a regular city block which intensifies as they do. Now, this is a picture of what actually happened on the ground. These are 6 blocks around the city in which the only one which has a garden as big as Geddes thought of it, but not ideally located, is the Ginat HaNevi'im at the very north of the city. All of the other gardens are the gardens that were realized and are significantly smaller than this ideal block. Yet they retain the idea of a center which is open and gives air to each city block and is a public garden. Now, this is about the population of Tel Aviv. Just to make the point of the way Tel Aviv was expanded, you can see that between 1925 and 1940, the population of the city grew from about 6,000 people to 160. This is an amazing growth, which of course had a very large price when it came to implementing plans, even such a thorough plan as Geddes's. So in reality, when we look at what really happened, as the plan was implemented as statutory plan in 1938, we had much less gardens than first appeared in the Geddes plan, in the Geddes original sketch. And if we look at the city today, then we see that a lot of those, of the remaining gardens were turned into small public buildings, and the story of how that happened is for another lecture. So if we arrive at towards a conclusion of the Geddes plan blocks, the Geddes plan blocks, we could say that the Geddes block is inseparable from the structure of the city, from the skeleton of mainways and homeways, and from the DNA of the city. It comes in many different shapes and sizes, but there is an essence to it that has to do with the center of an open space. And if we look at the city as it appeared eventually as a skeleton of gardens, public buildings, rose and vine lanes, and inner streets, perhaps it was not conceived by Geddes as a network, yet it holds great potential as a future grid of footpaths in the spirit of the garden city. In today's Tel Aviv, it could and should be the skeleton for a sustainable alternative network of pathways, allowing pleasant bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, which reuses, takes advantage, and maximizes the city's historic built-in qualities.
Thank you, Uti, for this really amazing research you've done and for this lecture.
I would just like to say in the end that this is based on a research which was invited by the Municipality of Tel Aviv about the Geddes Gardens. So I would like to thank the city's conservation department, and it was prepared with my partner, Adi Harnoy, and I would like to thank her as well.
Yes, and I hope that some of your conclusions of this report will be implemented in future plans of the city. This would be the most important thing, I think. But really just to highlight the unbelievable issue that, you know, it's so contemporary to think of a city like Geddes has planned already so many years ago. I mean, we're really facing a lot of Anthropocene questions that a city like he has planned originally could answer. Just to highlight what your report says is how would you really intensify this idea of a green city when you plan today?
I think first of all we should look at the Geddes legacy, I would say, as a sort of a skeleton that we just need to understand is there, because I think before we looked at this as a whole system, it seemed like there were gardens in various places or empty plots in various places, but they didn't seem to be a kind of a planned thing. So sometimes it's very important just to understand separate items as a system, and then the potential for reusing them is can be explored.
That's what we also know. I mean, he planned this way before this like fifth immigration wave came, no? Like this idea of a home block was sort of multiplied, not really by him, but by the people who were planning at the engineering department back then, no?
Yes, the whole of the area of Tel Aviv, which was developed east to the east, the northern part of the east of Tel Aviv was developed according to these concepts. I don't know if it was conscious or unconscious, but in fact, Tel Aviv is now endowed with these blocks which have voids in the center of them. And these voids are extremely precious. They provide much more than open space.
So it's like basically the block is like a plug that is then sort of could be like a matrix multiplied in a way.
Yes, it is that is what it is. First of all, it is a multiplied unit which takes a different, a slightly different turn in every application of it. But in essence, it's the same unit repeating itself. It could repeat itself in the future, and it could provide, I think mainly it could provide this alternative network of open areas which relies on it. And is an alternative.
Very important to also mention this diversity it creates. No, I mean, it creates a place for living, but yet also a place for a culture and a place for work all at the same time. And I think Tel Aviv itself has learned, like, for example, that neighborhoods like Ramat HaChayal and such where those facilities have been separated don't work as well as this Geddes plan, which sort of integrates all the facilities we need for living in one sort of space. And the plan up north, which is now is being built literally as Sde Dov, is also taking these elements of Sde Dov, I mean, with some sort of adjustments, but the ideas and sort of really takes this plan up north in a way, which is really beautiful to see.
Yes, I agree.
So yeah, sorry for, but I think just, you know, when looking at a separate building, it is very important to look at the block as a whole. And I think one of the things we are talking always about as the conservation department of the city is this sort of HUL approach that says that it's not only a building which stands by itself, but rather it's a building that accumulates the society within the block and within, of course, then the larger imprints of this block. So I would like to open this for conversation. I don't know if there are questions from the audience. I don't see any, but perhaps Shmuel and Ruti, you would like to sort of, I don't know, compare Jaffa and Tel Aviv in that sense, or? Shmuel, you were...
Okay. Listening to you again, Ruti, I would like to speak with you about the issue of destruction. So basically, you talk about the block which stayed, but the whole, a lot of the architectural fabric was destroyed during the years. And people don't talk much about destruction in Tel Aviv because Tel Aviv was self-destructing in a way. So it was not out of national or political reasons destruction as it happened in Jaffa, but out of kind of economical pressure. And in a way, Jaffa was frozen, I would say, even frozen in a way for 70 years, maybe, architecturally. And nowadays it's under this huge economical real estate pressure. So I think both of us talked about issues of significance that are besides the building itself, kind of trying to give a hint for the participant to look on other scopes. But it came to my mind this issue of destruction, which is very, very strong also in Tel Aviv.
I completely agree with you. I think it's a main issue. I don't know if I would use the word destruction or regeneration, perhaps, because a city is always rebuilding itself in a sense, and this architectural richness that we've come to have in Jaffa is perhaps due to the fact that it was undeveloped for so long, and now we don't want to let go of anything there. But perhaps if we were able to remove the political question aside, it would have been a real question of how do you regenerate such areas, and how much regeneration is right. Regeneration by way of removing and replacing, and when do you cross the line and the regeneration is actually beginning to kill this organism, which is the city. I mean, these are really heavy questions. I think we all know that, but we're all looking for that balance between
and I think also
nurturing and killing.
Yes, and but also sometimes conservation itself. I mean, how much can we hold a substance that wasn't meant to hold for so long? And is it right culturally? So it's also a question. There is another question from the audience. How does the speed of construction cause, or if the speed of construction caused traffic problems in the downtown planning area?
Nowadays?
Yes, I guess so.
Could you read the question again? I can't see it properly.
Oh, the speed of construction caused traffic problems.
We are talking about the speed of construction in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s?
I don't know. I can only guess, but maybe, yes.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer this because I don't know. I can only assume that the city was a mess for 30 years. Because, it was being built, destroyed. Yeah. People were living in these slummy tents and huts all over the place. Drainage wasn't in place. Like, I think the city of Tel Aviv was like a large construction site for about 30 years.
Yes, Shmuel, do you want to answer that as well?
I think it's, I always think about those days, especially in Tel Aviv, where people were not really busy with cultural heritage. So the only cultural heritage they had in mind and was the idea of modernism. So I think Tel Aviv destroyed all the layer of the early layer, or tried, at least the municipality and the city engineer at that time, tried really to hide all the elements of the pre-modern style. And in the way nowadays, and we are praising, the white city of Tel Aviv. So I want to claim that you have to look also on the layers behind the modern layer of Tel Aviv as well. And I'm sure Geddes would agree with me. And Oti, it was us also to plan Jaffa. But
yes, I would like to, you're very right about this, because in fact, Geddes, his mission was to connect Haifa to Tel Aviv. This is what he was asked to do.
Jaffa.
Sorry, Jaffa to Tel Aviv. Haifa to Tel Aviv, that's another project. But he was asked to connect Jaffa and Tel Aviv. This was really his main task, and I have to admit that he didn't really do that.
No, he failed because the municipality of Jaffa didn't cooperate with him.
Yes.
They thought that he is kind of a colonial agent, and they really kind of took the place far from him and tried to avoid meeting with him, and finally he gave up.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he complains that they don't, and so there was a lot of cooperation, planning cooperation between the Zionist movement and the British Mandate system. So both of them were very European, Central European, and they came here to the East, and I would say indigenous Palestinians really were kind of suspicious about them. And so they didn't cooperate with them.
But I really want to add another thing that perhaps, I mean, you can see it in the slide that is behind you, Shmuel, that, you know, there weren't so many cars back then, no? And all those buildings, they weren't built with parking lots, or some of them were, but most of them weren't. And I think this is one of the issues we're dealing with as well. What to do when you renovate a building? Do you do parking spaces? Do you not? Do you raise the buildings on pillars and dig underneath the ground? I mean, this was done for many years now, for many, many years. And I think slowly we understand that we don't want this traffic in the city. And the city, those buildings also, they cannot or should not or will not hold themselves up if you start, you know, to do too much to them without like reinforcing them so much that like the original fabric is almost gone. So I think the traffic plays a very big role nowadays as well. And I think Tel Aviv Municipality, I mean us, we're slowly understanding that the traffic is not wanted in the city. You know, we're also building a line, a train line in the city. So these things must be considered as well. Yeah.
So basically, we all agree not to speak about parking.
No, I think we can also, you know, on a more realistic or futuristic note, I think we can all agree that we are beginning to see the end of the age of the automobile. This will get out of, this will vacate the urban environment in 10 or 20 or 30 years. We will be back to a much less vehicled environment.
Yes, hopefully. Hopefully. I mean, there's also a plan of the city to have a city forest. We will show that in the evening as well. I mean, to view the city as a forest, no, and not to separate sort of nature and city, which is also a very interesting aspect when you come to think about not the human beings not dominating with construction, but rather letting nature in and being part of nature all the time, which I think was really what Geddes was trying to preach from the start.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if there are no other questions, I think we can end this really beautiful session we had here. And I would like to thank you, Ruti, and to thank you, Shmulik, for joining us. And yes, I hope to see many of the students' projects in our exhibition here. And yeah, hopefully we can do a lot of green and amazing projects in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.